During World War II, entire cities ran out of food, where shelves are stripped bare and every meal could be your last. This was daily life during World War II. With supply chains shattered and hunger spreading fast, survival came down to one question: what could last? The answer wasn't luxury or comfort. It was a handful of simple, almost forgotten foods. Foods tough enough to travel with soldiers into battle, and reliable enough to keep families alive through years of crisis. And here's the twist: many of those same foods still exist today. In fact, some of them can outlast even the most advanced products in a modern supermarket. In this video, we'll uncover 11 forgotten WWII foods' timeless survival staples that prove their worth in history and might be the very foods that save lives in the next global emergency. Number 1. Dried eggs. When we think of eggs today, we picture a carton in the fridge, fragile shells waiting to be cracked for breakfast. But during World War, fresh eggs were a rare luxury. Supply chains were collapsing, farms were struggling, and families had to find a way to replace one of the most important sources of protein in their diets. The solution was ingenious: dried eggs. Ordinary eggs were cracked, whisked, and carefully dehydrated until nothing remained but a fine powder. Once sealed, that powder was light to carry, easy to store, and remarkably long-lasting. For soldiers on the front lines, it meant scrambled eggs could still be served hundreds of miles from any farm. For families back home, it meant baking cakes, making bread, and cooking meals without needing fresh supplies that simply didn't exist. What made dried eggs so valuable wasn't just convenience, it was survival. Packed with protein, vitamins, and essential fats, they provided energy when meat was scarce and dairy was impossible to find. A single tin could sit untouched for years and still be safe to use. In a world of ration books and empty shelves, that kind of reliability was priceless. And here's the part that most people don't realize: dried eggs haven't disappeared. Modern versions are still sold today, and when stored in airtight containers, they can last a decade or more. Unlike fresh eggs that spoil in weeks, this powdered form keeps its nutrition locked inside, ready to be revived with nothing more than a little water. Think about the possibilities. In a blackout, when refrigerators stop working, a jar of dried eggs can keep breakfast on the table. In remote areas, campers and survivalists still rely on them for lightweight meals that don't rot in the heat. Even professional bakers use them in recipes where consistency matters more than freshness. Dried eggs may sound like a wartime relic, but they remain one of the smartest foods you can stockpile. Born in a time of global crisis, they carried soldiers through battles and families through shortages. And in today's uncertain world, they stand as proof that sometimes the simplest solutions are the ones that endure. Number 2. Lard and animal fat. In today's world, cooking fat usually means bottles of vegetable oil lined neatly on supermarket shelves. But during World War II, those bottles were scarce and families had to rely on something far more basic: lard and rendered animal fat. What seems old-fashioned to us now was once a lifeline, carrying both soldiers and civilians through years of shortages. Whenever a pig was butchered or beef was processed, every scrap of fat was saved. Instead of being wasted, it was melted down, purified, and stored in jars or tins. This process, known as rendering, transformed perishable fat into a stable, long-lasting product that could be used months after it was prepared. Housewives stirred it into dough, spread it on bread, and fried vegetables when butter was nothing but a memory. Soldiers carried tins of it into battlefields, knowing it could fuel both meals and bodies. Lard wasn't just food, it was concentrated energy. Ounce for ounce, fat contains more calories than protein or carbohydrates. In an age where hard labor and long marches burned thousands of calories a day, that dense energy was essential. A spoonful stirred into stew could stretch a small meal into something that actually satisfied hunger. A single tin could keep a family alive longer than almost anything else in their kitchen. And it wasn't only about eating. Animal fat was incredibly versatile. It was used to make soap, polish boots, preserve cast iron pans, and even create makeshift candles when electricity failed. In wartime, adaptability was everything, and fat provided options when almost nothing else was available. What's surprising is how practical this forgotten food still is today. Preppers and survivalists continue to render lard because it stores well in sealed containers, especially when refrigerated or canned. Unlike delicate oils that turn rancid quickly, properly processed animal fat can last for months, sometimes years, without losing its usefulness. Imagine a blackout, a supply chain failure, or even a camping trip far from stores. A jar of lard becomes more than just food. It becomes cooking fuel, emergency light, and concentrated survival energy. Born out of necessity during one of history's darkest times, lard and animal fat remain a reminder that sometimes the simplest resources are also the most powerful tools for endurance. Number 3. Canned bread. Most people hear the phrase canned bread, which it sounds like a joke or a strange invention from a science fiction story. Yet, during World War II, canned bread was not only real, it was a lifesaver. With supply lines collapsing and fresh loaves almost impossible to find, this strange product kept both soldiers and families from going hungry. The process was simple but brilliant. Dough was prepared, partially baked, and then sealed inside metal cans. Once closed, the bread was sterilized under heat, locking out air and bacteria. The result was a dark, dense loaf that could sit on a shelf for years without spoiling. It wasn't soft, fluffy, or glamorous, but in an era of scarcity, it was steady, reliable, and ready when nothing else was. For soldiers, canned bread meant portable carbohydrates that could survive long journeys across oceans and battlefields. While fresh loaves molded within days, this preserved version traveled thousands of miles without losing its form. A slice might have been heavy and slightly bitter, but it provided energy that kept troops marching and fighting when supplies were cut off. Civilians at home also relied on it. Families could open a can during food shortages and still find a loaf that was safe to eat. It became a symbol of endurance, a reminder that survival didn't require luxury, only clever solutions. For children, even a plain slice of canned bread, topped with a little jam or fat, felt like a treat compared to going without. What makes canned bread fascinating is that it hasn't completely vanished. Even today, specialty brands continue to produce it, often in New England and parts of Europe. Preppers and survivalists still value it because of its long shelf life, compact storage, and surprising versatility. Whether eaten plain, toasted over a fire, or crumbled into stews, it remains one of the few baked goods designed to endure crisis. Canned bread may not look appealing beside fresh bakery loaves, but its history tells another story. Born in a time of war, it proved that innovation can turn something ordinary into a tool of survival. And in a world where uncertainty never disappears, its lesson still holds power today. Number 4. Fermented cabbage. In times of war, survival often depended on the simplest foods. During World War II, one of the humblest vegetables became a secret weapon against hunger and disease: cabbage. But it wasn't eaten fresh. It was transformed through fermentation into something far more powerful: sauerkraut. Fermenting cabbage was an ancient tradition, but wartime gave it new importance. Families and soldiers needed vitamins to stay alive, yet fruits were almost impossible to find. Without vitamin C, scurvy became a real threat, and malnutrition spread quickly. Sauerkraut solved both problems at once. It preserved nutrients for months, required no refrigeration, and could be made with nothing more than salt, water, and patience. The process was deceptively simple. Shredded cabbage was packed tightly into barrels, sprinkled with salt, and left to ferment. Natural bacteria worked slowly, transforming it into a tangy, sour, long-lasting food. The flavor was sharp, the texture crunchy, and the benefits undeniable. Soldiers carried jars of it on long marches, and families stored barrels in cellars to survive harsh winters when fresh vegetables were gone. Sauerkraut wasn't just about nutrition. It was about endurance. A spoonful provided energy, improved digestion, and helped prevent illness when medical care was limited. In camps and villages alike, it symbolized resilience, the ability to take something ordinary and turn it into a shield against famine. What's remarkable is that fermented cabbage remains just as valuable today. Modern science has confirmed what wartime families already knew. It is packed with probiotics, supports the immune system, and can be stored for months without losing its strength. Preppers and homesteaders continue to make it, not just for flavor, but for the peace of mind that comes with knowing a single barrel can sustain life through long emergencies. Picture a blackout, empty markets, or weeks cut off from supply chains. A jar of sauerkraut becomes more than a side dish, it becomes security. It shows that survival doesn't always require complex technology. Sometimes it only requires salt, vegetables, and knowledge passed down through generations. Born in hardship, fermented cabbage remains proof that simple traditions can still protect us in uncertain times. Number 5. Cornmeal. When World War II disrupted global trade, wheat supplies dwindled, and bread, the most basic staple, suddenly became scarce. Families searching for alternatives turned to a grain that had been feeding people for centuries: corn. And from that grain came one of the most dependable survival foods of the entire war: cornmeal. Cornmeal is nothing more than dried corn, ground into a coarse or fine powder. It may sound simple, but its power lies in flexibility. During wartime, it became the foundation for countless meals. Pancakes, porridge, dumplings, and flatbreads could all be created with little more than cornmeal, water, and a bit of fat. When yeast and flour were rationed, this golden powder kept kitchens alive. What made it truly valuable was its ability to last. Stored in dry containers, cornmeal could remain edible for years, waiting to be transformed into warm, filling food. Families often kept sacks of it in their homes, knowing that even if everything else ran out, cornmeal could still provide energy. For soldiers, it was easy to transport, lightweight, and nourishing enough to fuel long marches or nights in the field. But cornmeal wasn't just about calories. It represented resourcefulness. In regions where wheat failed, corn grew reliably. Even in difficult soil, farmers could harvest large amounts and grind it themselves, creating independence from fragile supply lines. In a time when hunger threatened millions, cornmeal became proof that survival didn't always depend on imports or expensive resources. Sometimes the solution was growing right outside the door. Its cultural role grew as well. Families developed recipes that stretched tiny amounts of fat, sugar, or milk into satisfying meals. A pot of cornmeal mush could feed several children at once, and leftovers could be fried the next day to avoid waste. In homes marked by scarcity, it became comfort food, linking survival with tradition. Today, cornmeal still holds its place as a survival essential. Properly sealed in buckets or cans, it can last for decades. It remains inexpensive, versatile, and easy to prepare under almost any conditions. Whether baked into bread, boiled into porridge, or fried into cakes, it delivers dependable calories when other options vanish. Born out of necessity during history's darkest years, cornmeal continues to prove that the simplest ingredients can carry the greatest strength. Number 6, grit's scarcity has always forced people to rediscover foods that are humble yet powerful. One such food, often overlooked but vital during times of hardship, was grits, a simple dish made from ground corn that became a quiet hero of survival. Made by stone-grinding dried kernels into coarse particles, grits transformed into a warm, filling porridge when boiled with water or milk. They required no elaborate preparation, no rare ingredients, and almost no cost. This simplicity made them a lifeline for families struggling to stretch rations and keep hunger away. The strength of grits wasn't only in their affordability, but also in their endurance. Stored dry, they lasted for months, sometimes years in basic containers. Farmers could grow their own corn, grind it locally, and guarantee food even when supply lines failed. At a time when wheat and rice were scarce, grits became a reliable substitute that kept communities fed. For households, versatility was the secret weapon. A plain pot of grits could serve as breakfast, but with a spoon of fat, a sprinkle of salt, or a bit of dried meat, it became dinner as well. Leftovers weren't wasted. Once cooled, they could be sliced and fried the next day, creating new meals from the same batch. This ability to stretch calories across multiple dishes made it invaluable. Nutritionally, grits provided steady carbohydrates that fueled laborers, soldiers, and children alike. Combined with beans or vegetables, they created balanced meals that were both filling and practical. In kitchens marked by scarcity, they offered stability when little else could. Even today, grits haven't lost their relevance. Preppers still store them because they are inexpensive, lightweight, and simple to prepare under nearly any conditions. A handful of dry grains can transform into a pot of food large enough to sustain an entire family. Modern cooks might flavor them with cheese or spices, but the essence remains the same: comfort born from necessity. Grits stand as proof that survival isn't always about sophisticated technology or exotic supplies. Sometimes endurance rests in ordinary foods, simple grains, cooked with care, that carry people through their hardest days. Number 7, molasses history often shows us that the sweetest solutions appear in the hardest times. One of the most underestimated yet essential foods of crisis was molasses, a thick, dark syrup that became both nourishment and comfort when everything else felt uncertain. Created from the process of refining sugarcane or sugar beets, molasses was far more than a byproduct. Its sticky texture concealed incredible staying power, allowing it to remain edible for years without refrigeration. At a time when refined sugar was scarce and heavily rationed, this syrup stepped in as a dependable substitute that changed the way families cooked, baked, and survived. Molasses delivered more than sweetness. It was dense with calories, rich in iron, calcium, and vital minerals that people desperately needed when diets shrank to the bare minimum. A spoonful stirred into porridge or tea added both flavor and strength. Mixed into bread, cakes, or biscuits, it turned humble ingredients into meals that felt nourishing rather than plain. For children, even a drizzle of molasses on bread created the illusion of dessert in a world without treats. Its importance extended beyond the kitchen. Farmers used molasses to preserve animal feed, keeping livestock alive when other supplies failed. Healers used it as a home remedy for fatigue and weakness. Its thick consistency even allowed it to serve as a quick energy booster for workers and soldiers who needed stamina during long days of labor or marching. Storage was another advantage. Unlike fresh foods that spoiled quickly, molasses required little more than a sealed jar to remain stable. In root cellars and pantries, it stood waiting, ready to transform a pot of bland grains into something flavorful and sustaining. That reliability made it priceless. Today, molasses continues to hold relevance. Survivalists and preppers still recognize its extraordinary shelf life and versatility. Bakers rely on it for rich flavors, while health enthusiasts value its nutrients. Most importantly, it proves that even something often dismissed as a leftover can become a cornerstone of endurance. Molasses reminds us that survival isn't always about stockpiling luxuries. Sometimes resilience is hidden in unexpected places, a dark, sweet syrup capable of carrying families through hunger, hardship, and history itself. Number 8, canned stew. In World War II, one such product that quietly carried countless families and soldiers through struggle was canned stew, a simple idea that combined meat, vegetables, and broth into a ready-made survival meal. The genius of canned stew lay in its design. Fresh meat spoiled quickly, vegetables rotted in days, and kitchens lacked the resources to prepare elaborate dishes. But when cooked slowly, sealed tightly, and sterilized inside tins, stew became a complete meal that could wait months, sometimes years, without losing safety. All that was needed was a pot of hot water or a small fire, and dinner was ready. For civilians enduring shortages, canned stew was more than food. It was reassurance. Opening a can meant families could eat meat and vegetables even when markets were bare. It brought variety to repetitive diets based on grains or bread, reminding people of meals they once enjoyed before rationing began. A single can could transform a bleak evening into something warm, hearty, and sustaining. For soldiers, convenience was everything. Marching across long distances or entrenched for weeks, they required food that was compact, nourishing, and quick to prepare. Canned stew provided protein from meat, carbohydrates from potatoes, and vitamins from vegetables, all in one container. It was practical fuel, portable comfort, and a morale booster during endless campaigns. Its strength wasn't only nutrition, but also storage. Cans could survive transport across oceans, rough handling in supply chains, and unpredictable conditions on the battlefield. While bread crumbled and fresh produce vanished, tins of stew endured, waiting to be opened when hunger struck. That durability made it invaluable. Even today, canned stew remains a survival classic. Preppers keep it for blackouts and emergencies because it requires no refrigeration, little preparation, and delivers balanced nutrition. Modern versions may taste richer, but the principle remains unchanged. Security stored inside a metal container. Canned stew may not carry glamour, but its legacy speaks volumes. It proved that survival sometimes depends on the simplest promise, a hot, ready meal when nothing else is available. In moments of uncertainty, that promise can mean everything. Number 9, tea and coffee. In times of struggle, food provides strength, but drinks often provide hope. Among the most cherished wartime staples were tea and coffee, simple beverages that carried extraordinary power when the world felt uncertain. Both tea leaves and coffee beans could be dried, ground, and stored for long periods, making them perfect for conditions where fresh supplies vanished. Soldiers packed instant coffee in their rations while families brewed weak tea leaves again and again to stretch every ounce of comfort. These drinks were not luxuries, they were lifelines. For civilians, tea became a symbol of routine in the middle of chaos. Boiling water, steeping leaves, and sharing a cup offered normalcy when daily life had collapsed. It provided warmth in winter, hydration when clean water was scarce, and a sense of calm during long nights of air raids or blackouts. For soldiers, coffee was fuel. A single packet of powdered granules dissolved quickly, delivering caffeine that kept weary troops awake on night watches and long marches. It sharpened focus, lifted spirits, and created moments of relief far from home, even in the mud of trenches or the cold of remote outposts. That familiar taste reminded them of ordinary life. What made tea and coffee remarkable wasn't only comfort, but practicality. Both stored well in sealed tins, resisted spoilage, and occupied little space. Unlike perishable goods, they survived transport across oceans and through unpredictable climates, always ready to be brewed when morale needed lifting. Today, their role hasn't changed. Preppers still keep jars of instant coffee and bags of tea because they require no refrigeration, can last for years, and deliver both energy and reassurance. In blackouts, disasters, or long isolations, a warm cup can restore spirit as much as strength. The legacy of tea and coffee proves survival is not measured by calories alone. Sometimes it is measured by the comfort of routine, the focus gained from a bitter sip, and the reminder that even in the darkest times, a small drink can bring hope. Number 10, Vinegar. Some survival tools hide in plain sight, disguised as ordinary kitchen staples. Vinegar is one of those quiet essentials, simple, sharp, and endlessly useful. During times of crisis, it proved itself as more than just a flavoring. It became a preservative, a cleanser, and a lifeline. The power of vinegar comes from its acidity. This sharp liquid creates an environment where bacteria cannot thrive, turning it into a natural barrier against spoilage. Families under rationing used vinegar to pickle vegetables, stretching fresh harvests through entire winters. Carrots, cucumbers, and beets submerged in brine stayed crisp and edible for months, ensuring vitamins when gardens were bare. But preservation was only part of its role. Vinegar also served as a household disinfectant when soap and chemical cleaners were difficult to find. A cloth soaked in it could wipe down surfaces, freshen air, and even reduce the spread of illness in crowded shelters. Its sharp scent carried reassurance that something could still be kept clean in an environment where hygiene often collapsed. For soldiers, vinegar provided unexpected benefits. Mixed with water, it became a refreshing drink that reduced thirst during hot marches. It soothed sore throats, cleaned minor wounds, and kept rations safe from contamination. A single bottle, light to carry and easy to store, offered dozens of solutions in the field. What makes vinegar remarkable is its longevity. Properly sealed, it has no real expiration date. Stored in cellars or pantries, it waited patiently for the moment it was needed, ready to preserve, protect, or restore. Unlike fragile goods that demanded constant attention, vinegar offered quiet reliability. Today, its relevance has only grown. Preppers value it for pickling, cleaning, and first aid. Health enthusiasts praise its versatility, and ordinary households continue to rely on it without realizing they are using one of history's greatest survival tools. Vinegar teaches an enduring lesson. Resilience doesn't always come from complex inventions. Sometimes it comes from a clear, sour liquid that has guarded families through hunger, hardship, and uncertainty. Number 11, canned butter. Among the many foods that defined endurance in difficult times, few carried as much comfort as butter. Yet fresh butter spoiled quickly, turning rancid without refrigeration. To solve that problem, an invention appeared that changed the way people stored fat: canned butter. The process was straightforward but effective. Fresh butter was heated, poured into sterilized tins, and sealed airtight. By locking out oxygen and bacteria, producers extended its life far beyond the limits of ordinary dairy. What might have spoiled in weeks could now remain usable for years, stored safely on pantry shelves or shipped across oceans. For families, canned butter represented more than calories. It was taste, texture, and the small luxury of spreading something rich on bread when almost everything else felt plain. Children who had grown tired of dry rations found joy in a slice topped with golden butter from a tin. Adults valued it as cooking fat that transformed simple ingredients into satisfying meals. For soldiers, it was compact energy. Packed with dense fats, a single can fueled long marches, added flavor to otherwise bland field rations, and provided comfort during exhausting campaigns. It reminded them of home, even in the middle of uncertainty. The advantages extended to storage and versatility. Unlike fragile oils that turned rancid, canned butter endured heat, cold, and transport without losing quality. It was not simply food, but security, a guarantee that something nourishing and familiar would be waiting when needed most. Today, canned butter remains a respected survival staple. Preppers prize it for its shelf life, travelers appreciate its convenience, and households keep it as insurance against shortages. Its legacy proves that even the simplest pleasures can become vital when circumstances turn harsh. Canned butter endures as both comfort and survival, a golden reminder that small luxuries can sometimes mean survival itself. History has shown us that survival doesn't always depend on technology or luxury. Sometimes it comes from the simplest foods, humble staples that carried soldiers through war and kept families alive in their darkest days. These forgotten treasures remind us that resilience is built not in moments of comfort, but in moments of crisis. And the lessons they teach are just as important today as they were decades ago. If you've watched this far, it means you value these hidden survival secrets as much as we do. And this is just the beginning. There are countless more forgotten foods, lost techniques, and untold stories waiting to be uncovered. So if you want to be prepared, informed, and inspired by the wisdom of the past, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, because the next video might reveal the one skill, the one recipe, or the one idea that could make all the difference when you need it most. Don't just watch history, learn from it, and carry it forward. Subscribe today and join us as we unlock more survival lessons that could shape the way you face tomorrow.